Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we're talking swim baits. Specifically, how to catch big fish with swim baits post-spawn into summertime. This time of year, a lot of anglers begin to lose confidence in the big bait. They're willing to give it a try. They're willing to throw it in the spring, say February, March, April. But once that spawn starts happening, a lot of guys just set those baits down, and it's a mistake. You can catch a swim bait fish year round, but you can specifically target big bass with a swim bait all the way until the full moon in June. After that, it's more of a mixed bag thing. But from now until mid-June, you can catch those giants and you can do it with big baits. You don't want to set them down yet. That is a mistake. So what I want to do today is I've divided 4 categories. Essentially, I want to identify where you are, where you fish, and then I've got just a handful of baits for you. We're gonna keep this really simple. I mean, there's quite a few baits here, but this isn't for everybody. I want you to find the segment that applies to you, and then it'll just be a handful of baits. So we've got fishing, let's say the core of the country, essentially guys that aren't super far north and guys whose fish are not eating trout and kokanee. Okay, if you're not one of those 2 groups, I'm talking to you. I don't care where you are, I'm talking to you. We're gonna divide that group into 2. We're gonna talk about fishing shallow, we're going to talk about fishing deep, and the reason why is post-spawn, those fish split. If you were to take all the big fish in your lake and talk about where they go post-spawn, wow, these geese are going crazy back here. Hopefully that's not too loud for you. If you took all those big fish and you split them, more of the big ones go deep than stay shallow, but there are still plenty of big ones staying up shallow. So we want to talk about both segments. Then we will talk about guys that are in those trout and kokanee type fisheries. And then I've got just a little bit for the northern guy, which we've already talked about recently, but we'll just recap that. So let's start with the core of the country. Okay, guys that are, again, in those places where your bass are eating bluegill, shad, threadfin shad, gizzard shad, shiners, herring, what else? Did I miss anything? All those core species of bait fish. This is the time where you can continue to blast them coming out of the spawn. Let's start shallow and then we'll go deep. So shallow, essentially 3 things: a wake bait, a boot tail swim bait, and a glide bait. Things to understand coming right out the gate. Wake baiting is by far the most overlooked. Most people own a wake bait. Very few people fish them effectively. Very few people fish them consistently. A wake bait should be a major player in your arsenal this time of year. For the soft swim bait, a boot tail is the deal. Don't worry about wedge style tails whatsoever. Throw a boot tail, you want a lot of movement, and the biggest thing I want you to understand is drawing power. Bigger baits pull fish farther. And then for the glide bait, we want baits that are fast, they're aggressive. I don't throw a lot of giant glides post-spawn. But for me, where I am now, I'm throwing a lot of gizzard style glides, a lot of shiner style glides. But again, I don't want to throw giant profiles. These fish are up, they're feeding, they're aggressive. So let's run through these baits. Let's start with the glide. You might recognize that one. That bait is currently lighting the world on fire. That's the Spro KGB Shad. They were impossible to get there for a while. Everybody on the planet had them on back order, and then all those orders got filled, or at least a lot of those orders got filled. A lot of people have baits now. Now, the demand is so high, they might all be back ordered again tomorrow, but that's okay. Get on a back order, they will fill in. So the KGB Shad has just swept the market. If you are in a gizzard shad or shad fishery where they're chasing shad, it's super effective. Whether you're slow fishing it and just crawling that thing, letting it cut out, or you're getting really choppy with it and basically walking that bait subsurface, trying to imitate a gizzard, those big hard cuts that they make. Either way, it is an effective bait. I've had a blast with this thing since I first got my hands on one last fall, and have had an absolute blast with it. But it is a very effective bait, and it's that in-between size. Now, you guys know there's a bunch of glide baits I love. I love throwing the Waver. I love throwing a Bait Sanity Antidote. I love throwing a G-Rat Sneaky Pete. But I'm trying to keep this simple for you. And this is a highly effective bait that will absolutely get bit. You can keep your color selection super simple. Grab something shaddy and just call it a day. Just leave it right there. The bait's got great action, and action is more important than color a lot of times with glide baits. As long as you're in the ballpark on color, you're going to be fine. But again, we're talking about fishing shallow right now. So I'm throwing this thing, spawn ends, some of the fish leave, the shallow fish stay shallow, but they're gonna pull the cover, they're gonna recuperate. So you're gonna find them on dock pilings, you're gonna find them on shallow rock, you're gonna find them on grass edges. They wanna sit up against something while they recuperate. So I'm using that to target cover, okay? I'm not just out here fan casting for fun. I'm being very intentional with how I'm fishing that bait. Running dock lines, hitting corner pilings, backs of pockets, far back there as I can get, keeping that bait up high. You know, getting on a grass line and just paralleling that grass line, trying to draw those fish out. It's a very, very effective way to fish. For the soft bait, two for you, but essentially the same thing. A mag draft, standard mag draft, and the freestyle mag draft, okay? The freestyle I use less frequently than the standard this time of year, but every fishery is different. If I get into a fishery where the grass is already really popped up, I throw that freestyle because it's weedless, right? This one's rigged on a BKK, which is an awesome bait. So I've got this on an underspin. You can remove the underspin. You can adjust the weight positioning of this hook. It's movable. And I'll link all this stuff in the video description for you. But that guy right there, that mag draft freestyle, I can skip it up under docks. I can throw it over the top of grass. I can throw it in laydowns and roll it through the trees. It's just a way that I can really turn that swim bait into four-wheel drive and just plow through everything. But given the opportunity, if it's not too much cover, I'm going to stick with a standard mag draft because I want to throw the 8-inch. The 8-inch has incredible drawing power. It is highly overlooked. I love the 6-inch. I love this guy. But the 8 takes it to the next level. A lot of people don't put the time in here. They pick it up, they throw it. A lot of people own them, but I don't think a lot of people go out there and sling that thing all day. This is the time of year to sling it all day. The drawing power is remarkable. It'll pull a fish a long ways, and they will commit to that thing. That whiteback shad is typically my favorite color. If I don't know what I'm in for, that's my favorite color most places. I throw albino pearl shad a lot. I throw MB gizzard a lot. But if I just had that one, if I'm just gonna grab one and go, it's whiteback shad. Slow rolling. This bait has a sweet speed, and you'll see it. Throw it out there. If you go too fast, it'll start to roll, right? It'll start to get off to a side. Slow it down. Find that sweet speed where she's swimming perfect, and that tail's just back there wagging. The bait is magic. It draws giant bites. We blast them with it. It's a great, great option. Then the last category, like I said, is the wake bait. This is our wake bait. This is the river to sea tactical wake. We crush with this thing. We designed it to do some very specific things. This is a PB rat. Totally different profile, but both wake baits, both highly effective this time of year. For me, the rat I like to fish when the water's super high. You know, in a tidal fishery, when you get that super, super high tide, that's the deal. In a normal lake, if you get a big blast of rain and that water jumps up real quick, I literally use a rat bait to imitate a rat. That's what I like to do with them. Other people throw them just as a wake bait, but that, for me, they shine under those circumstances. You get a little flood of water. I don't care if it comes up 6 inches or 5 feet. Soon as you flood the bank, you better believe all those rats and mice and critters end up in the water. Their burrows get flooded. Turns on like magic. It's instant. They're on that thing. I love that rat bite. Now the wake, this is what I throw just day in and day out. I absolutely love to throw the wake. And I mean, I have thrashed mine. I've got wakes laying all over around here. They're all beat up. I'm bouncing them off pilings and rocks, and I put them where the fish are. This wake bait in particular, we designed this to fit a niche. There was a hole in the market. It needed to be done. I think the hole was there, and I think that's why so many guys don't blast them on a wake bait. So many wake baits are good for one thing, right? Just hard, steady retrieving. That bait's back there kicking. That's what guys do with a wake bait. That's a great option. It works really well. If you want to cover water, get up on the bank, parallel, throw around docks, just cover water with that thing. Clack, 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 clack. The sound this thing has is amazing. They crush it. But we designed this to do some other things too. This bill shape, this body style, it was designed to go super slow. You can creepy crawl this thing on a calm morning when the water's glass like this. You just creep it and it will just crawl on top, and it's not that overbearing, obnoxious sound. See, I love that loud sound when the wind is blowing or on a lake where there's a lot of noise, places where there's a lot of boat traffic. I love that loud sound. But on those calm mornings, shallow water, I think it can be too much, and I wanted a bait that would creepy crawl, and we were able to do that. This thing goes so slow. Then the other thing you can do when it does get loud, when you got a lot of waves, when you got a lot of wind and those waves are crashing, you can walk it and it'll clack, 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 super loud. So we designed it very specifically for this time of year. The other thing about this bait is most wake baits, if this is the surface of the water, most wake baits run nose down. It's terrible for your hookup ratio. So we designed this bait to sit very unique in the water. It sits super flat in the water, super flat. Almost to the point that if you're looking at it in the water, you're like, that's different. That's on purpose. See, we put this great big bill on here. This has a purpose as well. But by making that bait flat in the water instead of like this isn't a hook guard. Right? If this thing was standing on its nose, that thing would be blocking fish. But this bait runs flat and the hookup ratio is amazing. Everything was designed on purpose for very specific reasons. And this bait is deadly. A wake bait should be in your lineup. Whether it's this one or another one, I don't care. The wake bait should be in your lineup as you head into summer. It is a highly effective way to catch a giant fish. All right. That's shallow. It's that simple, right? That was not a lot of baits, and you don't even need all of them. Go get yourself a wake bait, and then get yourself either a glide bait or a soft bait, and go fishing. Fish with confidence, and it will happen. You will get the big bite if you stick with it. Now, deep water, you guys are gonna love how easy this is. My deep water game has been shook up in recent years. Meet the Baka burrito. 5-inch, 6-inch. That's my deep game. I kid you not. When I'm pulling out this time of year, I'm backing out off the bank. Fish have moved out. I'm fishing outside rock points. I'm fishing windblown points. I'm fishing humps. I'm fishing ledges. I'm fishing current breaks. That is my bait. That easy. Now I'm always tinkering with new stuff. Like This one from my buddy Josh, JSJ Baits. Awesome bait, awesome bait. I'm getting to know that bait. Crushed them on it already. But day in and day out, if I'm gonna pick up one bait, Baka Burrito. When do I throw a 5 versus a 6? If they'll eat a 6, I throw a 6. Because a bigger bait has more drawing power, gets the bigger bite. But if they won't eat it, or I'm getting short strikes, I go to a 5. It's that simple. This is Tactical Shad. Tim and I designed this with Mike Buca and the crew. It's like a Tennessee shad meets electric shad. That is the color in this bait, the color. It's magic. When I'm not throwing that, the one other that I really like is that Hudak color. Those are my 2 favorite colors, but hands down, that's number 1. I keep it that simple. Now, I'm gonna add one thing to the mix, and this isn't even a swim bait, but I couldn't dare talk about fishing deep water this time of year for post-spawn fish that have pulled out, talking big baits, not swim baits, big baits, without talking about these. We're just gonna take a little second here. My 1-2 punch this time of year is a burrito and a Magnum flutter spoon. This is a true Magnum flutter spoon. This is the mini mag. I crush them with both. Absolutely crush them with both. If I can't get them to eat the giant, I go to the mini mag. I catch so many big ones on this bait, it's ridiculous. But a flutter spoon targets those same fish. When the fish are aggressive, when they're chasing, I can get them to run down that swim bait and blast it. And you can fish these baits mid-column or on bottom. Keep that in mind. When I say deep water, I'm saying like 10 feet on out. Okay, that's where you're gonna see me throwing this right now. From 10 to 30, 35, I can fish them effectively. I can crawl bottom and just bump it along, or I can throw it out, count it down, and just wind it mid-column. Both work incredibly well. But when the fish aren't being aggressive, if they've sucked down to the bottom, they're in a bad mood, whatever, I switch over to that flutter spoon, pull that thing up, let it fall down through them. Pull it up, let it fall down through them. And you can get those fish to turn on and eat. And while it's not a swim bait, it's right there. It's that same game, right? You're talking about a giant treble hook. We're literally talking about the same rods that I'm gonna throw that on with a giant treble hook. It's the same game. They go hand in hand together. So even though it's not a swim bait, I'm cheating the system a little bit to let that in here. So for the core of the country, that was it. Choose shallow or deep, go fishing. You can catch these fish. Now for the trout and kokanee guy, I've got a little bit of stuff for you. Super simple on the baits. We've got a glide bait, a wake bait, a soft bait, okay? What I want you guys to think about is the color line. If you're not familiar with it, we've covered it a lot in other videos. Hopefully you are very used to that term by now, but if you're not, clear water fisheries, highland reservoirs, really any lake, but highland reservoirs and clearer water is where you can see the color line most effectively or most clearly. If you go out to your main lake points, you're looking at the point, you see it sticking out into the water, okay? Shallow water is kind of brown. As you see it come out, it kind of turns green, and then all of a sudden it turns to that true open water going out into the lake. It gets that blue color. That color line, where it shifts from where you can see that it's shallow water to now it's true deep open water, that color line is what we're talking about. Forget the bank. Don't fish the bank. Fish the color line. You can fish the color line on the bottom. You can fish the color line on the surface. You can fish the color line in between. Bass hunt out there on that color line. There's nothing there. If you're looking at your electronics, there's nothing there. And depending on the lake, that color line might be in 8 feet of water, depending on clarity. Might be in 8 feet of water. It might be in 55 feet of water. Doesn't matter. Fish hunt around that color line. They do. They sit down in the water column and they look up. They're sitting in that dark water watching the surface. Anything that goes above them, whether it's on the surface or it's mid-column, they've got that silhouetted, it's dead. That's how they hunt effectively post-spawn. That's why you'll be up there fishing, you're worming, and all of a sudden you hear something and you turn around, and out there 100 yards behind you, there's a trout skipping with 15 big bass trying to blow up on that thing. That's why. They're sitting out there suspended on the color line. Fish for them. 3 baits, super simple. You want a glide bait. You want a big glide bait. The reason why is you want to cover water and you want drawing power. We're talking about pulling fish up to the bait, okay? We're talking about fish that are on bottom or mid column and you want to bring them up to the bait. So larger profiles have more drawing power. This is the Bait Sanity Explorer Glide. This is a TW Steelhead, by the way, which is like the baddest color. If you are trying to imitate a trout, that thing is legit. But the thing about an Explorer, has an amazing swim, it's a fantastic bait, and it's totally affordable. In the world of glide baits, it is highly affordable, and it catches them. I love that bait. I've been preaching that thing for years. While other people were talking about a 250, I'm like, I'm throwing an Explorer, man. They pound this thing. It works. The next bait, again, is a wake bait. I don't care if you throw our bait, you throw a slammer, you throw whatever, I don't care. But throw a wake bait. Again, the power of a wake bait pulling fish up is not just about fishing the bank. We will take a wake bait and fish out there on the color line. I'll throw this thing in 110 feet of water on the surface, and those fish will come up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet from where they're suspended and blast that thing. It's incredible. Work it on the surface, get that steady walk going, or that steady swim going, and then just give it a little kick, let it cut out. Steady walk, let it glide off. It's a break in cadence is all it is. And it's not like it glides off like a glide bait, right? It's got a lip that's gonna mess that up. All it does is just turn. But that little break in cadence, if they see that thing and they start stalking it, they start following that thing and they'll be 4, 5, 6 feet under it. But all of a sudden that cadence breaks, that's their moment. They rocket up there and just blast that thing. But a wake bait can pull fish unbelievable distances because it's not just profile sitting on the surface. It's also pushing a V wake. And that wake, you know, is 10 or 15 or 20 feet across on a long cast. They're seeing all that commotion on the surface and then pinpointing what it's coming from. And then you've also got sound. So the wake bait has more drawing power than anything else. It's all going for it. That's why you need to throw that. And then the last one again is going to be, even though you are on a trout lake, even though you are on a kokanee lake, just hear me on this. Throw a paddle tail. And when you do, throw an obnoxious color. Albino pearl shad is my color post-spawn on trout and kokanee lakes. The fish already know that it's not a trout. That's a given. They see a mag draft up there in the water. That's not a trout. They don't know what it is. It's big. It looks like it's going slow. Maybe it's injured. Maybe it's worth eating. And then when they get up to it, if it's a big, bright, obnoxious color in that crystal clear water, I can't pound this into you enough. I don't care if you have 50 feet of visibility. White is your best color to start with, period. The fish pull farther to it. And then when they get there, it's all visibility, right? Just like that V wake on the wake draws fish farther, the brighter and the bolder the bait, the farther away they spot it. When they pull to that bait, they don't know what that is, especially in clear water. They're like, But they look at it and it's swimming, it looks good, everything else about it's good. If a bass had hands, they would never eat a bright white obnoxious bait in clear water. They wouldn't. They'd grab it and be like, what is this? But they don't have hands. So when they want to do that, they do it with their mouth. They swim up, they look at it and they're like, I don't know. They pop it just to see what it is and you've got them. In that clear water, trout and kokanee fisheries, it's not about whiteback shad. It's about albino pearl shad. White, bold, solid, bright colors. That's where it's at. I'm not saying the other one won't work. I'm just saying if you want to maximize that game where you're capitalizing on curiosity in the fish, it's those bold colors. And then last, just a quick one for the northern guys. We'll talk briefly about rods too. Northern guys, we've already talked about this, but I keep it super simple. Everything up there for me, and when I say northern guys, I'm thinking way north. I'm thinking smallmouth and largemouth, okay? Inland fisheries, a lot of those fish are maxing out at 3.5 to 5.5 pounds. The same baits work, but a lot of what the fish are eating is smaller, and that's why I downsize my baits. You can throw an 8-inch mag draft to catch fish. You can. But a lot of what they're chasing is here, and they're gonna eat these smaller baits anyway. Truthfully, there's a lot less pressure in the north overall. They'll run down a lot of baits. So keep it simple. That's the G-Rat Pistol Pete. I do add a split ring to the nose of that bait, which is something I don't do to most glide baits. I add a split ring to that, makes it super fluid, super darty, and they just plow that thing. And then these will come as no surprise. A 6-inch mag draft and that Big Bite B5. Hand in hand. One's a little bigger than the other. When do I throw one versus the other? When the pike have bitten off all of one, I go to the other one. I kid you not. These are highly effective baits. They crush fish. They're affordable. You can catch a pile of fish on them as long as they don't get bit off. But even if they get bit off, you caught a ton of fish first. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. It's amazing how well those baits work and how underutilized that is in the north. And again, I'm gonna link all this in the video description. I'll give you my favorite colors for every single one of these baits for those circumstances. Now for rods, you do want a dedicated swim bait rod. This is one of the few techniques, you know, a swim bait, a jerk bait, a jig. There's a few techniques where I'm like, no, you gotta have the right rod. You have to. A lot of techniques, you can grab a pretty universal rod and pull it off, right? But there are some things where it's gotta be exact. Swim baiting has to be exact, and here's why. You invest 50 bucks, 100 bucks, couple $100. If you're crazy, a few $1,000 in swim baits. You put in all the time, the effort, you learn where giant fish live. You finally get one to eat, and then your equipment fails you and she gets off because you couldn't control her. That's no good. You want all the odds in your favor. You use the right line. I use braid to leader on all my swim bait setups. I'm not crazy. I see what goes on online. I see guys recommending straight mono. I see guys recommending braid. I see guys recommending fluoro. I have used all of it. And I'm not talking once or twice. I'm saying I have caught multiple double digits on straight mono, multiple double digits on straight fluoro, a lot of double digits on braid to leader. I've gone back and forth, you know, gone to braid and then abandoned it again, gone back to fluoro, tried it again, gone back to mono. I've played all those games. Once you understand braid, you have to go up in size in braid. 65 pound at a minimum, you should be using 80. Once you do that, it's not about fighting the fish. Why do you need 80-pound line to fight a 7-pound bass? You don't. You need 80-pound line because it's thin anyway, and you are never gonna cast a glide bait off for the rest of your life. You're just not gonna do it. See, I'm fishing for years with clients. Some of them are excellent anglers. Some of them have never thrown a swim bait in their life. And not one client has ever cast off a single one of my big baits on braid. So for the guys that struggle with braid, understand that it's an equipment issue on your end. It's not the braid. You're not throwing heavy enough braid, number one. That's your big issue. And then after that, leader is everything. I like shock leaders. This is Sunline, Saltimate. It's their system shock leader, the fluorocarbon. They also have a mono. Mono is what I use for the wake baits. And on the wake baits, you can go heavy. You can tie a 40-pound mono, who cares? The stuff is thin, and I think that people don't realize that, because I talk a lot about fishing 60 to 80-pound braid to 30 to 35 pound leader, and I just watch guys glaze over, right? They're not having it. Well, they don't realize my braid is the diameter of 20 pound, and my 35 pound leader is, ready for it, 20 to 25 pound. This is Japanese, it's JDM line. It is thinner than US lines. The JDM companies use true diameters. They actually care. US companies, for the most part, just make up whatever they want. So like, a guy will have some big game and he's like, this stuff is rope, this 30 pound, you can't break it. Well, yeah, that's because it's 50 pound line. So when you buy a shock leader that says it's 30, it's a true 30. So it's the diameter of most brands' 20s. That's why we upsize so much. We are using the same line you are, you're just using a weaker line, so they made it thicker. Does that make sense? So when I fish, Brett, can you tell I wanted to get on this soapbox for a while? This braid thing drives me crazy. Braid is phenomenal for swim baits. It allows you to control your fish. If you get bit at the end of a cast, you can still smash a hook set. If that fish wants to jump, you can knock them over. If they're stretching mono out there and you've got a 12 pounder on the end of the line and she's trying to jump, she's gonna jump and she may spit that bait. But with braid and limited stretch, when she goes to do that, I can literally pull her over and knock her off balance. And you'll see a lot of times where we get a big fish that'll come to the surface, we knock them off balance and then just turn the winch on, and you never even let her get her head underwater again. Literally drag them. And there's people that watch those videos and they're like, that doesn't look fun. At that point, it's not about fun. You've done all the work. You wanted to catch a giant bass. You've got a giant bass on the line. Get the giant bass in the net, right? It's about getting to experience that, seeing that fish in person, taking a photo with her, seeing what that looks like, that memory, and turning that fish loose. So again, throw whatever line you want, but I personally love braid to leader for big baits. For my rods, our #1 rod has not changed in years and years and years. That Loomis 966 is an incredible rod. The reason we throw that thing is that it will throw soft baits and hard baits alike, and that is so rare. That's so hard to find. The problem with that 966 is they are rarely in stock. So you always want to check. If they're there, get one. But because they're rarely in stock, demand is so high, we're constantly looking for more options, right? We're constantly looking. And I found some this year and last year that I just love. This one, Shimano Zodius 7.9 extra heavy. If you had told me a couple of years ago that I was gonna be leaning on giant fish with a 7.9, I would have laughed at you. But this is a highly effective rod. I love it for throwing big jig hooks. I love it for throwing mags. It's great for the mag draft. Even though the mag draft is a treble hook bait, that's a 2-aught treble. And I want to control those fish. Again, I don't want them coming up shaking. That's how you lose fish. I want to be able to knock them over and drag them. And that 7.9 extra heavy has just turned out to be a remarkable swim bait rod at any price. But in my opinion, it is too much backbone, too much oomph for a lot of those hard treble hooked baits. On the other end of the spectrum, the St. Croix Victory. This is the Swimbait Ranger, SB Ranger. 8-foot heavy, I believe. Let me just verify. 710 heavy. 710 heavy. This is a much more moderate rod. It'll load deeper into the midsection, softer tip. This is a phenomenal rod for throwing small to mid-size glides like the Shad. Excellent rod for that. It's also fantastic for throwing a wake bait. It's awesome for throwing our wake. I'm able, because it is softer, more limber, the way it loads up, I'm actually able to be really accurate with my cast, because a lot of times with swim baits, you're just sort of lobbing it out there, right? You're landing it in like a 5 to 6 foot circle. You're not pinpoint with that thing. That's a rod where I can be really pinpoint. Same with this one, actually. When I'm throwing those softies, I'm being super pinpoint accurate around docks. And then when I'm waking, on docks. Same deal, I use that Victory and I'm able to be super accurate, put that bait right where I want, throwing it back through pilings. And a lot of that is the rod. Makes a big difference. The one other thing I want to answer, because I get questions all the time. Guys are like, why do you throw a Tranx and not a Corrado? I throw both. I throw a lot of reels. I love the 13 fishing A3. I put a bunch of time into the Daiwa Tatula 300 this spring. There's a bunch of big bait reels that I really like. I can't wait to get my hands on that Conquest MD for real so I can fish it hard. But the thing about a Tranx is this power handle. Looks crazy, feels crazy the first time you grab it, but the first time you lean on a giant and you start winching, everything in your head is like click, 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 all lined up, never going back. The Corrado is a phenomenal reel. I love it. I catch a lot of big fish with it. The difference is without a power handle, whether it's a Corrado or any other reel, there's a tangible difference in the fight. I'm fighting my swimbait fish on any reel until I put a power handle on it. When I put a power handle on, I'm like, just turn the winch on. Just get them to the boat. It's remarkable how much more torque you have against the fish with a power handle. So that's to answer the question, because a lot of people are like, Corrado Tranx, Corrado Tranx, what do I do? And they're like, why do you always throw a Tranx? It's not like you're in salt water. And that's the answer. For me, that power handle's magic. But I use them all. They're all great. But I just like that feel. You'll understand if you ever hook an absolute freak of nature giant bass and you lose it, because I've been down that road a few times, you will do anything in your power to make sure that the next time you have more power and that you can control the fish's head no matter their size and no matter the situation. That's what it's about for me. All right, guys, I'm getting off my soapbox. This video started so calm. We just talked about some baits, and then we got to the braid part. I hope that was some information that you can really use. I don't want to sway you, but if you're a fluoro guy or a mono guy and it's because you had braid problems in the past, I want you to understand that it was an issue in how you were doing it. It wasn't the braid, and braid is a really good option for you going forward. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up here. I'll link all the gear for you in the video description like we always do. Get out there, catch a giant. From now until the full moon in June, you can blast a great big one. And then after that, you can still absolutely catch them, but you don't target them as consistently. They're mixed in with other fish more. This is where you can still go and catch them very effectively. All right, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.